And so when I say Chinese, I want you to scream out the nation that's associated with this. For example, if I say Chinese, you're going to say what?
China.
All right, let's say it with authority. When I say Chinese, you say what? China. All right, that's just a test right there. So here we go. Chinese.
China.
Russian.
Russia.
Italian.
Italy.
German.
Germany.
Swedish.
Sweden.
Korean.
Korea.
Egyptian.
Egypt.
Nigerian.
Nigeria.
Black.
Exactly. Nothing. Tell him, Pastor. Tell him, Pastor. Black, nothing.
I hope you were able to successfully identify the issue.
They say, go see the African History Museum. Why do they start when the boats came? Why don't they start with the drums?
When we was kings.
No, they don't want it, but we are kings. But the 400 years doesn't have to deal with slavery. It has to deal with the Bible. It has to deal with us being disobedient to God. Us as 12 tribes of Judah, as a member of the Hebrew people, we are still inside of our genocide. 50% of all black deaths a year is abortion.
That's why you called Israel. Is it real? No, it's not. How did we leave there black and come back white? How did we leave there black and come back white? How did we leave there black and come back white? How did we leave there black and come back white? Can somebody answer that for me? Can somebody answer that for me? Can somebody answer that for me? Can somebody answer that for me?
Genesis chapter 11 verse 10 explains the genealogy of Shem. Shem was a black man in Africa. If you repeat this fact, they can't laugh at you. If you repeat this fact, they can't laugh at you. If you repeat this fact, they can't laugh at you.
Want to say peace and blessings, family. Want to say shalom lak, mash, pakha. Want to say peace and blessings to everyone. And if you guys can hear me clearly, just type 1 inside the chat. Let me go ahead and get this set up here. If you hear me clearly, type 1 inside the chat. All right, just doing something here. All right. But yeah, if you can hear me, type 1 inside the chat. And we're going to get started here in a second. Someone says sound choppy. I'm not sure if that's the internet connection or anything like that. All right, guys, how did my voice sound? If my voice is clear, type 1. If it's not, type 2. All right. So I'm not sure if I can't really hear my voice. I'm not sure if my voice is clear. Type 1. If it's not, type 2. All right. So I'm not sure if I can't really hear my voice. 1. 2. 3. 4. 5. 6. 7. 8. 9. 10. 11. 12. 13. 14. 15. 16. 17. 18. 19. 20. 21. 22. 23. 24. 25. 26. 27. 28. 29. 30. 31. 32. 33. 34. 35. 36. 37. 38. 39. 40. 41. 42. 43. 44. 45. 46. 47. 48. 49. 50. 51. 52. 53. 54. 55. 56. 57. 58. 59. 60. 61. 62. 63. 64. 65. 66. 67. 68. 69. 70. 71. 72. 73. 74. 75. 76. 77. 78. 79. 80. 81. 82. 83. 84. 85. 86. 87. 88. 89. 90. 91. 92. 93. 94. 95. 96. 97. 98. 99. 100. 101. 102. 103. 104. 105. 106. my voice sound deeper than usual? Let me see here. All right, let me adjust the settings real quick. All right, how does my voice sound right now? And I'm adjusting. How does my voice sound now? If you guys can all right. Does that sound better? Does my voice sound better? All right, just looking inside here. Okay, it's getting better. It's getting better. Let me make sure this mic is not too close to. All right, much better. All right. Let me adjust it again. All right, so how does it sound now? How does my voice sound now? Just doing check here. My apologies, family. How does my voice sound now? Does it sound better? All right, looking at the comment section. If my voice sound better, type 1. If it still sounds weird, type 2. Right. Let me change it again. All right, it must be my mic that is acting up. So I went on and changed it to my my mic on my computer here. Does it sound better? If this sounds better, let me know and we'll get started. All right, let me know if this sounds better. Yes, the Windows update stuff, because now, whenever there's, and some of you guys are techs, you know what I'm talking about. Whenever Microsoft is pushing updates, and especially if you don't receive those updates, they'll start doing quirky things with your system, like your peripherals and things like that, things that start acting kind of quirky. So what they've been trying to push is wanting me to update my OS from where it is now to the new version that they updated it to, from 10 to 11. And so right now I'm not allowing that to happen, because I want to properly make sure that that's not going to cause problems on my current machine. So by doing that, a lot of quirky things happen, to try to force me to doing that. So that's just a little geeky thing, a little tech thing that goes on that Microsoft does. But again, does my voice sound much better? If it does, just type 1 and we'll go ahead and get started. All right. If it sounds better, type 1 and we'll go ahead and get started. Let me just update my ticker here. All right, let's see here. All right. All right, so let's go ahead and get started here. So again, I apologize for the delay, and I apologize for the technical glitches. So again, I know a lot of you guys can understand, especially when you're using Windows. They have all kinds of quirky things that they do, especially if you don't update your OS. If you don't update your OS on time, or if you don't update it the way, it's a lot that goes with it, and for me, I just don't automatically allow them to update my OS. I want to make sure that their patches and their security patches and all that updates it's not going to cause problems with other things on my machine. All right, but let me make sure. Let me do one more thing here. All right, let me take this now. Now, is that better? Okay, that looks better. Okay, clear but static echoes Yeah, I'm not sure, family. Hope. All right. Not sure what's going on here, but we're going to go ahead and get started, family. And, you know, we're going to deal with watch night because I know that there's a lot of information that's out there that's not being taught correctly about watch night. And what we're going to do here is deal with watch night. All right. And really want to hone in on exactly what it is. You know, being in church, what most are taught is that watch night is the time that the slaves waited in anticipation to be free. And I'm going to share with you that that's not correct, right? I want to give you proper clarity. And for our assembly, we honor we come together on watch night. We don't celebrate New Year's. We honor our ancestors by remembering watch night. And I'm going to lay out why. You know, it's not any paganistic thing. And I'm going to show you that those that actually think and believe that New Year's, this is the original New Year's. That's not correct. So we're going to give a lot of clarity here. So again, I want to thank everyone for tuning in tonight. Let's see here. We'll give some shout outs here. Let's start off with some shout outs and then we get right into the lesson. Let's see here. I want to say peace and blessings to Stacy Pullum. I want to say peace and blessings to Shirley Greer, Darnell Blackshear, Stephanie McMillan, Tana Rich. I want to say shalom to you. What else do we have here? I want to say shalom to Lemuria Johnson. I want to say peace and blessings to you. Appreciate you for taking the time out to watch the presentation. I want to say peace and blessings to my sister here. All right. You know, matter of fact, let me take pause real quick. Actually, let me see here. Actually, I'm not do that. Actually, we'll keep it going. Let me just go ahead and continue. Want to say peace and blessings to Sister Carol. Appreciate you for holding down the channel, holding down the chat and all. So really appreciate you. And again, want to say some blessings to Moray Janet Newell. Really appreciate what she's doing down in North Carolina. And guys, if you're looking for an assembly to connect with, go down to North Carolina. Contact her. All right. And Dr. Newell, if you just go ahead and just post your information so that way they know where your location is. I want to say peace and blessings to Chris Matthews. Who else do we have here? Lynn Bernard, Inspired Identity, peace and blessings. Miss B, peace and blessings to you. Let's see here. Who else do we have here? Let's see here. DK, peace and blessings. Let's see here. Notorious Hebrew, peace and blessings. What do we have? All right. Sharice Reed, peace and blessings to you. Candy Demite, want to say peace and blessings to you. What else do we have here? OG3MA, peace and blessings to you. We'll get a few more because the chat is starting to go quicker on my end. Let's see here. Who else do we have here? I know I didn't get everyone. I'm trying to put this out. Marcus Jones, want to say peace and blessings to you. Brother Calvin, want to say peace and blessings to you. All right. We Live to Survive, peace and blessings to you. Makan Ya, want to say peace and blessings to you. All right. Who else do we have here? My buddy Ernest Higgs, want to say shalom to you. Israelite wife, Desiree, want to say peace and blessings to you. Who else here? All right, so we're going to go ahead and get ready to get started. I know more and more are coming in, and my apologies if I don't get to your name, but we'll try to make it up at the back end. So like the old school would say, like my grandmother would say, don't charge it to heart, charge it to my head, not to my heart. So again, we'll go through it towards the end or at the back end. Peace and blessings, my brother Jay Highstyle. Peace and blessings to Brandon Brunson, Elder Brunson. Appreciate you. So family, we're going to go ahead and get into this lesson here. I want to really go delve into this. There's a lot to cover inside this presentation. And the lesson for tonight is watch night, time of anticipation. And the question is, what were they anticipating? What was the anticipation all about? You know, similar to what we see today, right now, many of us are anticipating the return of our Messiah. You know, during the while Israel was in Egypt, they were anticipating their deliverance from Egypt, right? They was anticipating deliverance. So watch night, time of anticipation. And when we actually think about the Pesach, right? Time of what? Anticipation. They had to what? Anticipate the judgment coming. And then after the judgment being what? Removed, delivered, led out of the land of captivity. All right. So again, this is what we're going to cover tonight. And we're just going to keep it simple. I know I got a lot to cover. So let's start with this here. The court of the Gentiles, right? The court of the Gentiles, right? Let's start here. Let's get some clarity on this, because we know we see the Messiah going into the temple. We see that he's turning over the tables. He beat the money changers and all. But I want to make sure you guys understand what that is, because in the temple there was a section for those that are not blood descendants of Israel. So when you see the word Gentile, right, the Latin word that it comes from did not have all those who are not Israelites in the definition, right? So I want to make sure that this is one of those words of confusion, but I want to give clarity to so that way you guys can understand what this means and how this is all going to tie into the overall lesson. The court of the Gentiles. Let's explain this. We're going to use Josephus, Antiquity of the Jews, from page 308 to 309. When Josephus here says that the floor of the outmost temple or of the Gentiles, court of the Gentiles, was with vast labor raised to be even. Now, this is giving you a description of that location, that area of the temple, the court of the Gentiles, to show that Josephus is giving a historical account confirming that area. And this ties right into the area where the Messiah turned over the tables. Because in the court of the Gentiles, right, and this shows that all those that are not blood descendant of Israel, right, it wasn't just Israel going into the temple and sacrificing and honoring the Most High. There were others that was not blood descendants to the temple. Unfortunately, the Israelites at that time took advantage of them, and they were taking advantage of them over in the aisle of the court of, rather, the court of the other nations, or we could say Gentiles for the sake of conversation, but the court of the other nation outside of Israel, right? So when Josephus here says that the floor of the outmost temple or court of the Gentiles was with vast labor raised to be even or of equal height with the floor of the inmost or court of the priest, he must mean this in a gross estimation only, right? So this is just giving you information on that. So let's go to another one of his sources, the works of Josephus, complete and unabridged, right? Let's see what he says about this area. It says here, now in these conflicts, the robbers always sallied out of the temple and were too hard for the enemies. But the populace grew very angry and became more and more numerous and reproached those that gave back. And those behind would not afford room to those that were going off, but forced them on again. Let me read it again. Now, in these conflicts, the robbers always sallied out of the temple and were too hard for their enemies.
But the populace grew very angry and became more and more numerous and reproached those that gave back. And those behind would not afford room to those that were going off, but forced them on again, till at length they made their whole body to turn against their adversaries, and the robbers could no longer oppose them, but were forced gradually to retire into the temple. When Ananias and his party fell into it at the same time together with them, this horribly affrighted the robbers because it deprived them of the first court. So they fled into the inner court immediately and shut the gates. It goes on to say, now Ananias did not think fit to make any attack against the holy gates, although the other threw their stones and darts at them from above. He also deemed it unlawful to introduce the multitude into that court before they were purified. All right, so let's go to the notes of this source here, so that way you can get clarity of exactly what it's saying, what we're dealing with right here. You know, especially when we're dealing with the court of the Gentiles per se, because the Israelites, and we're going to show here that they did not, how can I put it, protect, or they did not, I would say they did not protect, they did not take that area of the court or respect that area of the court, that area of the temple, like they did the inner courts, right? They kind of had it as if, or the approach to it was like it was a lower tier, you know, a lower tier, similar to what we see happening, for example, when we start dealing with communities, when we start dealing with one side of a neighborhood to another side of a neighborhood, another one side of the city to another side of the city, the north side versus the south side, the west end, and all different areas. And it seems like for the most part, when we start getting into these type of communities, right, when we start looking at our community versus how others view our communities that's outside of our community, they tend to look at our community in a negative way. All right. But nevertheless, what we see here, the Israelites of that time, right, did not really hold the aisle. Oh, excuse me. I don't keep saying aisle, but the court of the Gentiles. They did not really hold that or treat it equally or with reverence, just like they did the inner courts. Why? Because they set up and used that as a marketplace to hustle the very people that is trying to come in and worship the Most High. So they used it as a time of hustle. So let's read this and I'll give clarity. It is worth noting here that his Ananias, the best of the Jews at this time, and the high priest, who was so very uneasy at the profanation of the Jewish courts of the temples by the zealots, did not, however, scruple the profanation of the court of the Gentiles. And it goes on to say, as in our Savior's days, it was very much profaned by the Israelites and made a marketplace, nay, a den of thieves. So this is giving confirmation that even the high priest, as we see here, Ananias, he did not hold this portion of the temple in high regards. As you see here, it's clear that they used this area to set up a marketplace. It was a hustle. We see this happening in church today. You know, so many pastors teaching that we're not under the law, but they teach in tithe. You know, you go into church, right? A lot of these churches, they brought the marketplace into the church. They're selling all kinds of books, all kinds of CDs, all kinds of different things that are hindering people to really receive the light. It's gone corporate, so to speak. So what was happening at this time, in a nutshell, when in this particular area, let's just say if someone came into the area that were not Judeans, they would come in and they would want to do a sacrifice, but their sacrifice would not be accepted. Right, so then they would be directed over to one of the merchants, right, to purchase a sacrifice that is accepted. They go to purchase this sacrifice, right? They go to give their currency, but then they're told that we can't accept your currency. you're going to have to what? Convert it, right? You're going to have to convert your currency. And then oftentimes they would charge more, right? A lot more. You know, they would not give them dollar for dollar, put it that way. They'll give them less, right? So what the end result is, they spend far more to get a sacrifice than what it should have cost, right? They spend double and triple, you know, and it was a hustle. If some came with their own sacrifice, it was rejected, then they have to go purchase this overpriced sacrifice over in their court, right? And then the money that they had, the currency that they had, would not be received. So now they have to convert their currency to a lower equivalent, much lower, not equivalent the value, right? And so it was a big hustle. And that's why they refer to this area as being the marketplace, right? Because they made it a marketplace. In other words, a den of thieves. Instead of being an area, a house overall, the temple being a house of prayer, they made it into a den of thieves without scruple. And it gives scriptures here. So again, here, according to Josephus himself, when he speaks of the two courts, right? We're not getting into all of this, but you guys get the understanding of here that we see that the area of the Gentiles, the court of the Gentiles, was not held in the same high regards as the inner courts, right? So, but nevertheless, but the consistency that we see here is that we see those that are not blood descendants of Israel coming to do what? Honor. They're honoring the Shabbat. They're honoring feast days. They're coming to honor the Most High. So it wasn't just Israelites coming to the temple. It was non-blood descendants of Israel that was coming to the temple. So Exodus chapter 12, verse 48 and 49. I want to highlight this real quick because unfortunately, when we really are dealing with the scriptures, many of us are under this impression because of how things have been taught that there's two covenants, one for Israel, one for the non-Israelites. In other words, blood descendants of Israel. There's laws and statutes and commandments for Israel, but for that are not blood descendants of Israel, they're not under the law. They don't have to abide by any of the laws of that to govern Israel, but they can hold on to whatever they hold on to. They're under the law of grace. I'm just going to leave it at that. But we see inside the text, right, there was always one overall covenant for the entire nation of Israel. Just like this United States, there's one constitution. There's not two constitutions. One for those that are citizens of the United States and those that are coming in just to visit this area. No, that's not how it works, family. And that's where we've been poorly taught when it comes to approaching the culture of Israel, because we're dealing with Israel as a nation. Israel is a nation. You know, now anyone that wants to live among the Israelites, there's guidelines. So one law. So we see an example of this with Exodus chapter 12, verse 48. And I'm reading from the Tanakh. It says, if a stranger who dwells with you would offer the Passover to Yahweh, all his males must be circumcised. Then he shall be admitted to offer it. He shall then be as a citizen of the country, but no uncircumcised person may eat. So we see in this text, right, you could not be uncircumcised and honor the Passover, right? You could not be uncircumcised and be considered a citizen of Israel, or be as a citizen among the Israelites. You can dwell among them, but you would not be considered a citizen. That's here in this country, right? If you're not born naturally in this country, right, then you have to go through a process of becoming what? A citizen, right? That process, there's guidelines for that. You know, you going through Ellis Island and, you know, learning of the culture of the United States, learning of the states, the 50 states and the capitals, all these different things that they put in place, you know, the preamble, memorizing all those different things. So there's a set of instructions for that to happen. So likewise, there are instructions that are set aside for those that are not descendants of Israel to come and what? Live among the Israelites. So that's what this is saying. One law to govern what? All. One law. It says here, again, let's go to verse 49. There shall be one law for the citizen and one for the stranger who dwells among you. So, and all the Israelites did so, as Yahweh had commanded Moses and Aaron, so they did. So let's confirm this with Isaiah chapter 56, verse 1 through 7, because I'm going to show you that in this text, that guess what? All of Israel and the strangers among them, as well as the eunuchs, right, are going to do what? The thing that pleases God. Right? When we look at Abraham, he had those that was not blood descendants of within his household dwelling among him. He had his bloodline descendants, and he had strangers. He had servants who were from other cultures, other communities. So all of them, right, had to be circumcised. All those that lived within his house, whether they are direct descendants of his and those that are not, they have to be circumcised as far as the men. And so that's the law, one law. So they were under one covenant within that household. So just want to give clarity just to make sure that you guys fully understand exactly what it is. You know, when the scripture says one law. So let's go to Isaiah chapter 56, verse 1 through 7. Let's see what it says. Let's confirm this. And I'm reading from the top. For soon my salvation shall come and my deliverance be revealed. Happy is the man who does this, the man who holds fast to it, who keeps this Shabbat and does not profane it, and stays his hand from doing any evil. Verse 3, let not the foreigner say, who has attached himself to Yahweh, Yahweh will keep me apart from his people. And let not the eunuch say, I am a withered tree. You know, the eunuchs, those that were not able to produce. In Matthew chapter 19 gives you clarity on the eunuch, right? Gives you clarity. Some that made themselves eunuch by way of being castrated. Some that were born not being able to produce a seed. And others, because of their commitment to the Most High, chose not to be married. Right? They chose not to be married. So that's where it says, I am a withered tree, or in some translations, you'll see a dry tree, because they don't have a seed. They did not produce a seed. But nevertheless, we see with the eunuch, but let's look at the instructions here. It says, thus saith Yahweh, as for the eunuch who keep my what? Shabbats, who have chosen what I desire and hold fast to my covenant. So when we deal with the Shabbats, we're not just dealing with a 7-day Shabbat, right? All the feast days, those are what? Shabbats. All the feast days are Shabbats, right? All the feast days. And you could go to Leviticus chapter 23 for those that are not familiar with the feast days. Go to Leviticus chapter 23, right? Those are, like I said, the feasts are Shabbats. Also, let me see if I can pull it up here, and I'll just pull up the text here and I'll read it to you, because we also see in Exodus, the Most High gives us clarity about his Shabbats, right? Exodus chapter 31. I'm not going to pull it up on the screen. I'll just read it to you. But we see that the Shabbat is important here. Notice what it says. And Yahweh spake unto Moses, saying, speak thou also unto the children of Israel, saying, verily my Sabbaths, we see plural shots, ye shall keep, for it is a sign. See, the Shabbats are a sign. So anyone that says we don't have to honor the Shabbat, they are telling you that we don't have to follow the signs. Right? Now, notice what it says here. You can go to the Exodus chapter 31, verse 7, right? I'm reading verse 13. Speak also unto the children of Israel, saying, verily my Shabbats ye shall keep. It's not an option. Ye shall keep. Right? That's a commandment there. Right? Ye shall keep. Shamar. Right? Observe, keep, execute. For it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that ye may know that I am Yahweh that doeth sanctify thee. Verse 14, ye shall keep the Shabbat, therefore it is holy unto you. Everyone that defileth it shall surely be put to death. For whosoever doeth any work therein, that soul shall be cut off from among his people. 6 days may work be done, but in the seventh is the Shabbat, a rest holy to Yahweh. Whosoever doeth any work in the Sabbath day or Shabbat day, he shall surely be put to death. Wherefore the children of Israel shall keep. An option. The children of Israel shall keep, shall execute, shall take heed. Shamar, the Shabbat, observe the Shabbat throughout their generations for a perpetual covenant. In other words, continuing. There's no breaking here. Verse 17, it is a sign again. The Most High said, it is a sign between me and the children of Israel forever. For in 6 days, Yahweh made heaven and earth. And on the seventh day, he rested and was refreshed. And he gave Moses, when he had made an end of communing with him upon Mount Sinai, 2 tables of testimony, tables of stone written the finger of the Most High. So these commandments belong to the Most High. They were not written by Moses. These are the commandments of the Most High. So again, he said, this is a sign. In other words, proof, evidence. And one of the great signs that we have on the Shabbat is the resurrection of our Mashiach, our Messiah. It occurred on the Shabbat, towards the end of the Shabbat. So I encourage you guys to go into the playlist or look at the videos. I did a teaching almost a year ago, teaching. I think the title of it is He's risen. He's not here, something to that effect, but dealing with the resurrection of the Messiah and showing you systematically how to identify exactly what day with scripture and recreating the Hebrew calendar. So the Messiah was resurrected on the Shabbat. As we pointed out, it is a sign. Okay, but nevertheless, let's go ahead and get back here. I just want to share that with you. So going back here, we see the eunuch. It says, who keep my Shabbats, who have chosen what I desire, hold fast to my covenant. Verse 5, I will give them in my house and within my walls a monument and a better name than sons or daughters. I will give them an everlasting name which shall not perish. As for the foreigners who attach themselves to Yahweh. Now we're dealing with foreigners, those that are not blood descendants of Israel, to minister to him, to love the name. In other words, the reputation, Hashem, the name, reputation, which is the literal name, we know, Yahweh, but also the reputation that comes with the territory behind the name, right? The Sham means literal name, but also it means reputation, it means fame, it means glory. These are the reputation, again, behind the bearer of the name of Yahweh, to be his servants. All who keep the Shabbat and do not profane it and hold fast to my what? Covenant. You cannot have the covenant with the 10 commandments. The 10 commandments, those 10 commandments, that is the covenant. That is the covenant. The 10 commandments is the covenant. You remove those commandments, you just have a blank check. And that's what's being taught, as if there's a blank check. Those 10 commandments are the foundational commandments, right? All the other commandments are going to teach us to honor those 10. And the Messiah took it a step further. He said all the laws and the prophets are going to teach two key principles: to love the Father and love each other. But he did not say that the commandments are done away with. He was expounding on the question that was asked to him, that out of all the commandments, what's the greater of, what is the greatest commandment? They never asked him, well, are you doing away with the commandments? Which commandments should we just keep and disregard the others? No, he said, out of all the commandments, two is going to teach these key principles: to love the Father and love each other, right? And he says, the law and the prophets, right, hinges on these two key principles. We'll teach these two key principles. So verse 6, as for the foreigners who attach themselves to Yahweh to minister to him and to love the name, right, of Yahweh, to be his servants, all who keep the Shabbat and do not profane it, and who hold fast to my covenant. 7, I bring them to my sacred mount and let them rejoice in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and sacrifices shall be welcome on my altar, for my house shall be called a house of prayer for all people. Now let's go to Deuteronomy. Let's identify some prophecies here, and we'll tie this all in to watch night. Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 36, 37. And I want to make this clear, and I want to do a lesson on it. I have a presentation I put together, but I'm going to do a lesson on it so that we can understand Deuteronomy 28. Contrary to what many believe, right? Contrary to what this chapter has been taught, chapter 28 is a continuation of Deuteronomy chapter 27. Right? There's a service, there's an ordination service, there's a confirmation service in which the Most High is now passing down the covenant now to the generation that's going to go into the promised land, the sons and daughters of those that was cursed to die in the wilderness because of their disobedience. So you will see that in there, you will see towards the end of that chapter, right? You'll see curses that are listed there. So after each curse is read, of what Israel's saying that they will not do, right? It's being read by the priests, right? Between the two mountains, right? Israel is literally reciting what's being said, right? They're hearing what's there, rather, and then once the priest says what they read out the curses, the law of the curses, then Israel would respond by saying Aman. In other words, Aman means Hebrew. It means consistency. It means being permanent. It's not just faith and trust, because those are just terms. Those that's good to, but it doesn't give you the depth of what Aman really means. Faith and trust comes from the same Hebrew word Aman, and it means consistent. And also it means go to the right hand. So at the end of that chapter, you see Israel reciting, saying Aman after each part is read. After each one is read, then when you get to chapter 28, it starts off with the blessings. And then when you get down to verse 15, actually 16, it gets into the consequences. So chapter 27 lists the curses. Chapter 28 lists the blessings. And then when you get past verse 15, you see the curses. So the actual sequence, still carrying over from chapter 27, is the curses, the blessing, and the consequences. So Israel say Aman, they are saying that they are going to be what? Consistent. And so Israel already knew the importance of going to the right hand, right? Because we see in Acts, we see when Stephen gives his testimony, and he is what? He's killed, right? He's murdered, he's stoned. He sees the vision of the Son of the Most High, our Messiah, sitting at the right hand, right? The right hand of the Most High. So Israel already knew the importance of going to the right hand. So that's what Aman, if you hear me say Aman, That's the primitive root. Amen. That's getting into the Greek pronunciation of that, but it's aman, right? Aman. That's how you pronounce it. Aman. And don't fall for any of the delusions when you hear someone say that, hey, if you say amen or aman, that's amen ra. That's completely wrong, right? Amen, amen ra, that is a Greek, right? That is a Greek, that a Roman, right? Transliteration. The actual deity, far as from the Egypt, from the Kemet, right? Or the name is actually Yamanu. So don't fall for that delusion of saying if you say Aman or Amen, that you're actually worshiping the Egyptian deities. That's incorrect. All right. So nevertheless, so let's deal with some of the curses here. It says here, Yahweh will drive you and the king you have set over you to a nation unknown to you or your fathers, where you shall serve other deities. You will serve other Allahayans of wood and of stone. We're seeing it right now, right? When we deal with the wood, the groves, right? We see the Christmas tree, right? That's wood. Stone, right? Chakras are what? Stones, right? So many of our ancestors, so many of our brothers and sisters, rather, are what? Promoting chakras, promoting the tree, promoting serving other deities, right? So wood, right? And when we start understanding the Christmas tree, the palm tree for the Egyptians, the evergreen tree for the Romans and the Greeks, right? The Babylonians had the palm tree, but that is what? Phallic worship. So we see they served what? Other deities of wood, right? What I pointed out. And also they're of stone. And we see that today. We see that today. Many are what? Getting into the chakras and all those different things. Okay. So verse 37, you shall be a consternation, a proverb, a byword among all the people to which Yahweh will drive you. So this is being fulfilled right now, right? We still get mocked. There's still songs that are saying about us. If you guys go back onto the channel, you'll see a video I uploaded with cartoons, litter, mocking us. Even businesses use blackface, right? When you start getting into the minstrels, Conkin, which was an actual business, literature like Agatha Christie, 10 Little Indians, really was not 10 Little Indians. It was 10 little niggers, 10 little nigger boys. That's what her book was actually titled. So we could go right into that, right? And see and get proof. Give proof. Denny's. A lot of these things we still seeing it today. A lot of, especially in commercials from Japan. We see them, they're mocking us. We see a lot of the stuff, products that many are purchasing on these big companies. Guess what? Many of them mock our people. We're still seeing this right now. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo, catch a piggy by its toe. If we hop and go, eeny, meeny, miny, mo. You guys done played that, trying to pick and see who's going to be it. Guess what? That's actually a slave song. That is a song for capturing runaway slaves. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo, catch a nigga by the toe, right? If he holler, make him pay. Make him pay, right? Then it changed from that to eeny, meeny, miny, mo, catch a Negro by the toe. If he holler, make him pay $20 every day. See, we have songs and we have proof that no other community was treated the way that we are treated. No other community is insulted the way that we are insulted. No other community is a group of people like us always have to be at the bottom of the totem pole when we deal with any government that have instituted the institution of race. We are at the bottom. You go to Spain, there's racism over there. Russia, racism over there. We still deal with racism all over this world. Be surprised in Japan, right? There's racism over in Japan. The dark Japanese versus the white or the lighter Japanese. I witnessed that firsthand. I was shocked to see that. So it's around the world. So we see again, wherever this institution of race is presented or within a government system, we are at the lowest part of that totem pole. All right. Nevertheless, byword, proverb among the people, songs and slogans and stories and psalm, proverbs, poetry, all of these things about our people. Now, let me go to another source here, right? The Negro Law of South Carolina, 1818. Now, some of you guys saw the presentation I gave last night, and I'm not going to get into all the specifics of that presentation, right? I gave clarity for why the Mavumbas, I'm not Mavumbas, but the Mandingos and others, right, honing in on them, right, did not want to be called Negroes. And in the actual source said that they did not want to be called Negroes because that word Negroes was pointed to being slaves. It meant being slaves. It meant being slaves. So they did not want to be called Negroes because it meant being slaves. And they did not want to be called slaves, right? And this is the source that I read. But I'm going to go down to section 4. This is coming from the Negro Law of South Carolina by John Belton O'Neill, 1818, page 5. The term Negro is confined to slave Africans. In other words, in parentheses, have the ancient Berber and their descendants. It does not embrace the free inhabitants of Africa, such as the Egyptians, Moors, or the Negro Asiatics, such as Lascars. Right? So we see here is making it clear that that word Negro was used interchangeably with slave. So anyone that tell you differently are not giving you or using this source correctly. So in the source that I highlighted yesterday, the Mundingos, right? It was highlighted in that source that they did not want to be called Negroes. Not that they did not want to be called Black, because if you say Black, then that means that they hate, they're self-hating. They're hating others that are dark like them. No, they did not want to be called Negroes. Big difference between saying Black versus saying Negroes. Right? So they didn't want to be called that. They did not want to be called a name that was used interchangeably for slave. All right. So I can attest my grandmother didn't like that word Negro, because my grandmother, along with my great grandmother, right? My grandmother was raised, on an Indian plantation down in Georgia, right? And so, in a nutshell, her and my uncle Pastor Jerry Carr, the late Bishop Jerry Carr, right? They were raised on an Indian plantation. But my grandmother, when she was a little girl, like 4 years old, 4 years old, she had to go out to pick cotton with her grandmother and great grandmother. And that term, using that word Negro, was something that they did not want to be called that label because of it being connected to slavery. All right. So Negro at that time was different than how it's being used today. So there's other words even today that many of us don't want to use that may not have a negative origin. For example, many of us on here, matter of fact, Tom, how many of you guys will be offended, especially brothers up in here, if you would be offended if someone called you Tom, type 1. If you're not offended if someone referred to you as Tom, type 2. Let's take a quick survey here. So if you, if you see that the word Tom, if you call Tom, type in the comment section whether or not you would be offended. Right? If you would be called Tom, type 1 if you would be offended. Type 2 if you would not be offended. All right, and we'll read the results once you guys make your comments here. And I'm going to give clarity here, and I'm going to use this as an example. Because again, the word Negro took on a very negative definition, meaning because of the very people that oppressed us. All right. So again, let's see here. I'm going to give you, I'm going to share with you and use this as an example of why I asked that question. And I'm going to explain it to you in a second here. All right. So again, if you're offended if someone called you Tom, if those fighting words, because I know most of us are what that when you hear someone call you Tom, those are like fighting words. Right? Those are like fighting words to someone. All right. So let's go ahead and read the comments here, and we'll go ahead and I'll give to you Tom. All right. So all right, we see. Let's see here. J. Highstyle 1 for offended. Smitty 1 for offended. Sister Carol 2 because Sister Carol got to cheat because she heard some of this teaching before. Devontae Israel 1 said he'll be offended. Sister Yvette 2. We live to survive 1. Now I'm going to say just about every man is going to put 1. Every man going to put 1 because it's something about calling a man, a Tom, because you refer to it Uncle Tom. Now Calvin gave a great answer here, Tom, but not Sambo. That's when you actually really understand Uncle Tom's cabin, if you really understand the fullness of the story. But pretty much all the men said they'll be offended. Right. But actually, that word Tom, right, is a Hebrew word, right? That means perfect. It means undefiled. It means plain. It's right. And guess what? Jacob was described as being what? A Tom. Right? This is where you get the house Negro and the field Negro from. Jacob and Esau. Esau was the field Negro, so to speak, right? According to how it's been explained, right? And Jacob would have been the house Negro when it was used in paint a negative picture of this word. But actually, Jacob was referred to as being Tom. Job was referred to as being Tom. Abraham was referred to as being Tom. In other words, being perfect, being upright, being undefiled and perfect from a biblical perspective means having integrity. So all of us are supposed to be what? Perfect, right? We're supposed to be upright. We're supposed to be, how can I put it? Undefiled. So Tom, right? Tom, that's an example that most people don't know. If you call Tom, you're ready to fight someone because you don't want to be called a Tom. But in the scriptures, from a Hebraic perspective, Tom, right? That is a term of what? Being an honorable term. Ancient Hebrew Tom. But nevertheless, just want to use that as an example. This is the same thing when we look at that term Negro. Negro became what? Negative, because it was used interchangeably with slave. All right. So I just want to use that as an example, give you an analogy to do the comparison so you really understand. Because I'm telling you, that's right, Dre Leah, man, shoot. Though you could be lose your life over calling somebody Uncle Tom. Because Malcolm X even gave the comparison of a house Negro and field Negro, right? He turned. And that's further from the truth when you understand Uncle Tom's cabin. Tom, Uncle Tom wasn't a sellout. Actually, Uncle Tom did everything he can to protect his people. Even when slaves would run away. Guess what? Tom didn't rat them out. When the slaves wanted him to run away early on when you read the book, when he found out son was going to, I think son or daughter was going to, son was going to be sold off for debt. And also Tom was going to be added into it as well, was going to be sold off too. So she wanted Tom to run away with her and her son. And Tom said, no, you go ahead. I'm going to stay back here. I'm going to stay back because if I run away, the master's going to punish all the rest of the people, the other slaves. So I'm going to stay back. You go. See, Tom was totally different. We've been institutionalized to accept. All right. But anyway, let's go ahead and get it, continue here. So the term Negro is confined to what? Slave Africans. It's been made into a byword. It was a byword. It was used interchangeably with the word slave. It says it here. I use this as a source and other sources that I have to show that this term Negro was used interchangeably with the word slave. And this is why in the source I made reference to yesterday, the Mandingos, they did not want to be called Negroes. They didn't, not saying that they did not want to be called black. They did not want to be called Negro because the source gave you the reason why, because they are what? That word Negro is interchangeably used with. So I just thought I'd give you clarity on that. All right. So let me give you some other examples, right? What you see on your screen to the left here, Mammy's little alligator bait. Show me one other community, any other community, right? That the children was being used for alligator bait. Show me one community outside of our community. Our children was used as alligator bait. They were used to do what? For slave owners, for Caucasian and those that were not part of our community to do what? Go out here and do what? Use our children to catch alligators. So on your screen, show me one community. And I have plenty of examples. But look at here, Mammy's Little Gator Bait. This was actually a play in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Notice at the bottom here, it says courtesy of Library of Congress. So I put this here, make sure you see a little caption here to understand that this is facts. Anyone that tells you that this didn't happen, that this is not true, guess what? All lies. Because look at here. You see the children? You see the little children? You see the little children? Right? These are little kids. See the blood here? But see the alligator. This was an actual play. Now look at this. Some of you guys probably remember singing some of these songs, or having a song similar to this sang to you when you was a child. Some of you parents probably sing this song, but of course a song to your children, and don't even know that or realize that you're actually teaching them a song that came from Mammy's Little Alligator Bait. Hush-a-bye, don't yo cry. Mammy's little pickaninnies going to get a present mighty soon. When the stars peeping and the moon it am a creeping, then your mammies when sing to sing this song. Shut your eye by and by. Man will whip you if you cry. Someone am a coming through the gate. Go to sleep. Don't you peep. Listen to me tell you, yo's mammy little alligator bait. Hush-a-bye, baby, don't you cry. You guys heard this song before? But this is the actual origin of that song. We don't even realize a lot of the songs that we're singing is songs that was written to persecute our own people. And yet we're being taught that we should not remember these things. These things we should just dismiss. Hey, you know, Christ died for all of us. That's in the past. In this country alone, our people are going to always be 400 years behind the Caucasian. Family, come on, we got to be real with this. And the sons and daughters of those people are still what? Benefiting off of what? Generational wealth that was what? Accumulated off the backs of our ancestors. It's a lot of things that came from slavery, like hush puppies, cornbread balls, to what? Throw at the dogs so the dogs can eat those things. You know, it's a lot. You know, those hounds. It's a lot, family, that we just have no clue, that we are completely oblivious to. So make a note of this. You can look this up. You can vet the information that I'm presenting here. Mammy's Little Alligator Bait. Look it up and make sure you type in Library of Congress. Mammy's Little Alligator Bait, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, right? Kaz K. Harris is the producer of this show or this play. All right. So let's go to Zephaniah chapter 3, verse 17 through 20. Now I'm reading it from the Tanakh. Your Yahweh Elohim is in your midst. In other words, in the midst and among us, in the middle, in the center, a warrior who brings triumph. This is encouragement to Judah. Because in this text, we'll see the northern kingdom, which is referred to Israel, or some case they're referred to as Ephraim. We'll see the southern kingdom referred to Judah, but then we'll also see Jerusalem. And everywhere you see Jerusalem, for example, when we see Jeremiah chapter 31, when we see Jerusalem, a distinction between the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, and then we see Jerusalem, Jerusalem represents the heart of Israel. So that's the heart. That's where the Most High dwells. That's where the covenant dwells, in your heart. This is why the prophecy says that the Most High is going to do what? Circumcise our heart. He was going to what? Write his commandments, his covenant into our inward parts, unlike what he did in the wilderness when they were written on these two big tablets. He was going to write it into our heart, our inner parts. He was going to circumcise our heart. Anyway, that's a whole nother discussion. All right. So again, it says here, your Yahweh Elohim, some will say Yahweh Elohim. I'm not getting into all of that, but Yahweh Elohim is in your midst. A warrior who brings triumph, who will rejoice over you and be glad. He will shout over you with jubilation. He will soothe with his love. It goes on to say, those who long disconsolate, those long disconsolate, I will take away from you the woe over which you endured mockery. We are enduring mockery right now. You have people that are mocking us right now. Oh, you a Hebrew Israelite. Oh, you one of those guys mocking you. Oh, you honor the Shabbat. Oh, you part of a cult because you honor the Shabbat. But the Seventh-day Adventists, they honor the Shabbat, but they're not called a cult. Oh, you honor the feast days. Oh, you a cult. You see how Isaiah prophesied this thing, and this very thing, the very time that we're going to live in. Good, evil, evil, good. You tell people you honoring the Shabbat, they're gonna call you crazy. Man, you tell people in the church you fasting, but you a Muslim, or you don't eat pork, Muslim, or you going out to do evangelism, but you're a Jehovah's Witness. All the things that we are supposed to be doing, other cultures are doing, but not the people who are supposed to do it. Anyway, let me stop. Verse 19 in At that time, I will make an end of all who afflicted you, and I will rescue the lame sheep and gather the strayed, and I will exchange their disgrace for fame and renown in the earth, in all the earth. So the Most High is referring to the affliction and restoring his people who scattered to the four corners of this earth, who's been afflicted. Verse 20, at that time I will gather you. Remember, the Messiah said in Matthew 24, when he talks about the great tribulation, he says, after what? The great tribulation, there will be what? Signs of his return, and that he is going to do what? He's going to dispatch angels, right, to the four corners to gather his people. We see right here, at that time I will gather you. And at that time, I will bring you home, for I will make you renowned and famous among all the people of the earth. When I restore your fortunes before their very eyes, said Yahweh. See, we have to understand what resurrection is. Resurrection is not what we've been taught in the church. We think that our ancestors, many of them died thinking that, you know what, I'm going to die in order for things to get better. I'm going to die. I'm going to endure all this pain. Some of them got institutionalized to allow themselves, and I'm not saying all, some, to thinking that being abused is long suffering. Being abused, hey, endure it because, hey, when you die, it's going to be better. No, that's not what the scriptures teach about resurrection. Your resurrection don't start when you die physically. It starts right now. What you make a decision on is what side of eternity you will spend it on. Whether you want to spend it on the eternity of the good side in terms of the Most High restoring, or are you going to do it on the bad side? Tossed, right? Eternal. Tossed in that, because that lake. So we have a choice to make. When you understand the prophecies, Ezekiel, right? You'll see, chapter 38, you'll see, right? A prophecy of pulling or restoring Israel from their graves. The prophecy of restoring. And the prophecy of doing it and declaring it, and a prophecy of what? Doing it. Didn't say after they die, when he's going to restore Israel, right? Right now, Israel is in place right now, gathered, we cut off, from our parts, as Ezekiel talked about it. Ezekiel had to speak life. Can these bones be revived? Pretty much every Baptist church, Methodist church, especially Kojic, when they do revivals, they go there. But that text is referring to Israel, restoring Israel. Can these bones be revived? He says he's going to pull us out of our graves. And then a couple of verses later, he says, and when I pull them out of the grave. So resurrection doesn't start when we just die physically. It starts right now in the day and time we live in right now. Your choice is going to determine what side. Anyway, let me stop right here. At that time, I will gather you, and at that time, I will bring you home, for I will make you renowned and famous among all the people on the earth when I restore your fortunes before their eyes, said Yahweh. Deuteronomy 28, 49, and 40, through 53. Here's another prophecy. And we may have to fast forward just so that way we can get to some of the other stuff, right? Yahweh will bring a nation against you from afar, from the end of the earth, will swoop down like an eagle, a nation whose language you do not understand. Wait a minute. Aren't we in the position right now? Our ancestors got kidnapped. That's the word rapture, right? Raped, kept, taken away, snatched, and taken to a land among people, a language that we cannot understand. Our people speak this English and some of the other languages. But when we think of our ancestors, right? The description, the picture of them is saying that what? They were illiterate. No, they were very literate. But they just didn't speak the language of some different nations that have oppressed us. So this is why they wrote things in the way that they did. This is when we start getting into symbols and signs that they had among themselves, especially when you start studying the people of West Africa and you start understanding the Nsibiti language. symbols, a secret language of symbols and signs that you see, which is called the Euchara cloth. And you see on this cloth, you see the symbols, the signs, the ebos and all. They use this as what? A way of secretly communicating. But anyway, but it says, will swoop down like an eagle, a nation whose language you do not understand. Verse 50, a ruthless nation that will show the old no regard and the young no mercy. Do you guys know that 3 weeks ago, a senior citizen, a dark melanated woman, was found hung from a tree in North Carolina? She was lynched and hung from a tree, not respecting our elders here, not showing any mercy of the young. Because our young people getting gunned down in the streets. We see it all on television, being played out before our face. We got men, knees at the back of their neck. We got a man inside the Walmart with a gun, getting ready to purchase, get gunned down. We got Tamar Rice playing with a toy gun, not pointing at anyone. Cops pull up and shoot him dead. We could go right down the list. Breonna Taylor. We could go right down the list. How this country and other countries show no regard for our elderly and no regard for our young people. It shall devour the offspring of your cattle and the produce of your soil until you have been wiped out, leaving you nothing of new grain, wine, oil, of the caving of your herd. This is what our ancestors went through. In the lambing of your flocks until it has brought you to ruin. It shall shut you up in all your towns throughout your land until every mighty towering wall in which you trust has come down. Wait a minute. Every towering wall which you trust shall come down. One of the things that our people keep trusting is these religious systems that have come together to enslave our people. We keep trusting this system of the institution of Christianity, the institution of Catholicism, the institution of Islam, the institution of Judaism, the institution of Hinduism. We could go right down the list of all the participants that have enslaved our people. Stand firm on this right here. Those towering walls going to come down, and some of the other things that we as a people keep trusting. We keep trusting the very people that have suppressed us, that did all these, committed all these heinous and perverted things next to our people. We expecting them to be our Messiah, to tell us what love is, to even tell us what the Messiah is going to do for us. They have themselves included on the side of the judgment that Yah's people is going to be at far as restoration. No, that doesn't work that way. The Most High is going to clean up all these nations. Because guess what? There's a feast day. You read Zechariah, there's a feast day. There's a Feast of Tabernacles that all nations are going to have to attend. And who's going to be at the front row seat? Israel. Anyway, it shall shut you up in all your towns throughout your land until every mighty towering wall in which you trust has come down. And when you are shut up in all your towns throughout your hand that Yahweh, your Elohim, has assigned you, you shall eat your own issue, the flesh of your sons and daughters. This cannibalism, we can prove this has happened to our people. I'm not even going to get into it. That Yahweh Elohim assigned lo you because of the desperate straits to which your enemy shall reduce you. So let's go into New Year's Eve. Let's deal with watch night. Now, looking at the chat here, can I get 15 minutes from, if you guys could give me 15 minutes, just type in 15 minutes. If you give me 15 more minutes, type 15 minutes inside the, just type the number 15, right? Inside the chat. All right. Just type the number 15 and, inside the chat if you could give me 15 minutes. All right. All right. So let's do the calculation here. And this will determine how much time I have. Sister Carol gave me 15 minutes. Dr. Newell, so we're dealing with 30 minutes. Sister Stacy gave me 15 minutes, 45 minutes. I praise Elohim every day, another 15 minutes. Now we had an hour. Devontae, an hour and a half, 15 minutes. D. German, right, an hour and a half. Sister Yvette, an hour and 45 minutes. Calvin, 2 hours. All right. Yeah, I'm just joking with you guys. They're just joking with you guys. Right. Not going to be that long. Right. So now that I laid everything out, I know some of you guys like, wait a minute, he's going to talk for another 2 hours. He adding all these 15s up. Y'all should see when I do that, when I do these speaking engagements, right, locally, right, I'll use that as an icebreaker. Right. But anyway, so let's deal with December 31st. All right. New Year's Eve. Give clarity on New Year's Eve. The original New Year's Eve was actually called Fat Tuesday. Let me say this. The original New Year's Eve was actually called Fat Tuesday. Fat Tuesday is connected to Ash Wednesday. So Ash Wednesday, this allegedly Christian festival, was taken from Rome, from Roman paganism, which in turn took it from Vedic India. See, ashes were called seed of the fire of the god, fire god Agni, with power to absolve all sins. Even if a man does 1,000 things that one ought not to do, by bathing in ashes, he or she will cause all of that to be burned to ashes, as fire burns a form with this energy. Another source said ashes stood for the purifying blood of Shiva, in which one could bathe away sins as Christians bathe in the blood of the Lamb. At Rome's New Year Feast of Atonement, let me say that again, at Rome's New Year's Feast of Atonement, guess what? The Romans had a Feast of Atonement. So even though many are teaching we don't have to honor the Shabbats, right? The feast days, the holy feast days of the Most High, but many have no problem with honoring Rome's New Year Feast of Atonement in March, right? Remember, we're dealing with Ash Wednesday. That is what? Connected to the Roman New Year Feast of Atonement, right? People wore sackcloth and bathed in ashes to atone for their sins. Then, as now, New Year's Eve was a carnival of eating, drinking, sinning, on the theory that all sins will be wiped out the following day, right? So this is where we have New Year's Eve here. The days were moved, right? Because the spring equinox is when the Greeks, the Romans, and other cultures recognized as their New Year's. But now here, right, dealing with the Gregorian calendar, we see that January 1st is the New Year. December 31st is what would be equivalent to Fat Tuesday. So this is why you see a lot of people get drunk, drink, do all kinds of things, eating, drinking, all kinds of things, right? What happens on New Year's Eve stays on New Year's Eve, go through all of these different things, right? And wake up the next morning with no conviction, right? These are the behaviors that come from the original New Year's Eve, right? And the New Year's Day. So New Year's Eve was a carnival of eating, drinking, and sinning on the theory that all sins would be wiped out the following day. As the dying god of March, Mars took his worshippers' sins with him into death. Therefore, the carnival fell on Dies Martis. In other words, the day of Mars, right? Mars, the god of war, the day of Mars. In English, this was Tuesday, because Mars was identified with the Saxon god Titu. In French, the carnival day was Mardi Gras, which is Fat Tuesday. Wait a minute, Mardi Gras, Fat Tuesday. guess what? We see the carnival day inside the scriptures. That's when the Israelites, right, they decided to what? Build a golden calf, a goat demon, the goat of Mendez. And they put that goat onto what? A table, right? A float, which is a movable altar. And if you read the scriptures correctly, they began to have carnival. They were drinking and doing all kinds of things that come with the territory. This is exactly what we see here, right? The French, in French, the carnival day was Mardi Gras, which is Fat Tuesday, the day of merrymaking before what? Ash Wednesday. The Ash Wednesday, when we start dealing with what? The Roman Day of Atonement. So guess what? When you put those ashes on your forehead, some of you guys, prayerfully, you guys don't do that. Guess what? You are honoring the Roman Day of Atonement. You're honoring a feast day. You're honoring a holy day that's not of the Most High. That's why in Amos chapter 5, the Most High made it clear to Israel. He said he don't honor their feast days. Why? Because they mixed and meshed it with other cultures and made it into something else, interpolation. So when we look at Leviticus 23, we see the Most High call the feast days his feast days. But when we get to Amos, he said, those are your feast days. And even told him that captivity is going to come because you have mixed and meshed with other cultures. You brought other deities into what? The temple. Man, there's all kinds of deities that's inside the temple, inside the place of worship, not just in the church, outside the church. Because yeah, a lot of our brothers and sisters would talk a lot about the church. Look what's going on among brothers and sisters right now that's outside the church. We could talk about the church. I could go right down the line, which we're talking about it right now. But look at some of our brothers and sisters that are supposed to be awakened, and look at some of what they are doing. Look at some of the things that they are engaging in. Right? Using polygamy as a way of what? Trying to circumvent their flesh that they have not subdued, doing all kinds of things, twisting, bending, and twisting the law, the official law being what? A marriage certificate, and they're writing their own agreements, basically love letters, and signing it, and then break it right after they sleep with the girl, the woman, the young woman. Family, this is, anyway, let me stay on here. A lot of stuff going on. So in French, the carnival day was Mardi Gras, in other words, Fat Tuesday, the day of merrymaking before Ash Wednesday. So who was the Vedic god Agni? This is Agni. Agni, Vedic fire god, wedding to Kali under her name Ambika, in other words, Little Mother. She represented the primal ocean of blood from which all things arose at creation. He represented the fructifying fire of heaven, in other words, lightning. Their combination meant vital heat. Vedic sages said the soul of all the universe, universe, the doctrine of uni, the Etruscan god, goddess, the triple goddess, universe. Verse means the doctrine of so when we put it together, universe, the doctrines of uni, right? The Etruscan god, this is where you start understanding the triple goddess, the triune, the Trinity, right? Anyway, moving and still is made of a combination of blood and fire. Agni also appeared to consume sacrifices that were burnt on their altars. He was a prototype of such Indo-European fire bringer as Lucifer, Prometheus, Etana, Hephaestus, and Hercules. So again, what is watch night? Let's go to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary of watch night, right? A devotional service lasting until midnight, especially on New Year's Eve. That's what they have inside this entry. That's what they have inside this entry. So let me take put a little substance on my throat because my throat is dry here, right? So let me play a quick clip while I drink some of my tea here.
I'm so glad you're here because you can bring great clarity. Can you tell us a little bit about the Sephardic Jews and how they were scattered because they went west?
I sure can.
Because the reason why I want to is because a lot of them, and a lot of people don't know this, are in the Caribbean.
They are.
In the islands.
And you're one of them. I know that.
I'm one of them.
I know that.
Because, you know, a lot of folk don't know that those roots are there. One of the first batches of slaves that came to Jamaica, they were the Sephardic Jews. It's documented.
And they're all over the Caribbean, South America, Central America, and even the South Central United States.
Wow.
And DNA testing is a factor in all this now.
All right. Just wanted to clear my throat. All right. So watch night, again, a devotional service lasting until after midnight, especially on New Year's Eve. So is watch night December 31st a devotional service? Excuse the typo. Is watch night December 31st a devotional service? The Huffington Post article about watch night. Let's go to the Huffington Post. Let's see what they say here. Watch night service in the Black church in America symbolizes the historical fact that on the night of December 31st, 1862, during the Civil War, free and freed Blacks living in the Union States gathered churches or other safe spaces while thousands of their enslaved Black sisters and brothers stood, knelt, and prayed on plantations and other slave-holding sites in America, waiting for President Abraham Lincoln to sign the Emancipation Proclamation into law. So think about this. So we were taught, this is what we're taught, that our ancestors are waiting in anticipation to be delivered from President Lincoln, to sign the Emancipation Proclamation. If you study the Gullah Wars, right, we know this took place well before then, because, you know, our brothers and sisters that participated in the Gullah War, and especially when we get into Spanish Florida and all that, they were granted freedom. That's how many of them ended up in, for example, Oklahoma, Tulsa to be exact, some of the places, Louisiana, some of the other places. We'll do a refresher on the Gullah Wars. But if you study the Gullah Wars, right, our ancestors that fought for their freedom, that fought to rescue some of their enslaved brothers and sisters, not taking them all the way up to Canada, going right down into what? Florida, Spanish Florida, right? They were granted freedom. They were given there was an Emancipation Proclamation at that time, but we don't know our history because of how it's been spoon-fed to us. So it's not for the most part the fault of our own. But nevertheless, it says here, waiting for President Abraham Lincoln to sign the Emancipation Proclamation. So, putting this together, and when you really read this, like our ancestors were viewing him as a type of Messiah. So it says the Emancipation Proclamation legally recognizes that the Civil War was fought for slavery. And when we go to the Encyclopedia Britannica, this is what it says about Watch Night. Watch Night, also called Freedom's Eve, Christian religious service held on New Year's Eve and associated in many African American churches with a celebration and remembrance of the Emancipation Proclamation. In other words, enacted on January 1st, 1863, which freed slaves in the Confederate States during the American Civil War. Many mainline Protestant churches in the United States sponsor a Watch Night service on New Year's Eve. The tradition of Watch Night service may be traced to the early 18th century in Moravian churches, when churchgoers began to marking the occasion with a vigil to reflect upon the year past and to contemplate the one to come. John Wesley adopted the practice for his Methodist followers, who held similar vigils monthly with the full moon. So was the Negro slaves, was our ancestors, because Negroes and slaves was interchangeable at that time, was they truly waiting and anticipating for President Lincoln to sign the Emancipation Proclamation into law? Let's go to history.com. Let's see what they say about the Emancipation Proclamation. On September 22nd, soon after the Union victory at Antietam, he issued a preliminary Emancipation Proclamation declaring that as of January 1st, 1863, all slaves in the rebellious states shall be thenceforward, and forever free, while the Emancipation Proclamation did not free a single slave. Let me say that again. While the Emancipation Proclamation did not free a single slave. Let me read it one more time for the people in the back. While the Emancipation Proclamation did not free a single slave.
What?
Not a single slave. It did not free a single slave.
What?
It was an important, well, I didn't put it all up here, but you guys see it here, right? Not free a single slave. So what was President Lincoln's true position on slavery? Glad you guys asked. Let's go back here. Let's finish this, some additional notes from here. Slavery was an unqualified evil to the Negro, the white man, and the state, said Abraham Lincoln in the 1880s. In his first inaugural address, Lincoln declared that he had no purpose, directly or indirectly, to interfere with slavery in the states where it existed. He reiterated this pledge in his first message to the Congress on July 4th, 1861. The Civil War was 3 months old. What explains this apparent inconsistency in the statement? And how did he get from his pledge not to interfere? How did he get from his pledge not to interfere with slavery to a decision a year later to issue an emancipation? So what was President Lincoln's true thoughts about our ancestors, right? And guys, you can get this from Lincoln's speech, Charleston, Illinois, September 18th, 1857. And these are quotes from that speech. I will say then, I am not nor ever have been in favor of bringing about in any way the social and political equality of the white and black races. So he's making it clear that he could care less whether or not we are treated equal, right? That I am not nor ever have been in favor of making voters jurors of Negroes, nor of qualifying to hold office, nor to intermarry with white people. And I will say, in addition to this, that there is a physical difference between the white and black races, which I believe will forever forbid the two races living together on terms of social and political equality. We're still dealing with this today. And in as much as they cannot so live, while they do remain, together, there must be the position of one superior and inferior. And as much as any of her man, or typo here, any of her, I guess, man or whatever, I can't remember what I put it here. But nevertheless, it says, in favor of having the superior position assigned to the white people. So nevertheless, this may just a typo, might have been when I cut and paste from the actual document. So I should have spell checked this here. Nevertheless, he wanted to make sure there was a difference to show who's superior and who's inferior. And he wanted to make sure, as you see here, am in favor of having the superior position assigned to the white race. So this is the institution of slavery, to make sure that there's a line drawn between the superior and inferior. The Aboriginals in this country was classified as inferior because they were conquered. Also, the enslaved is our people, our ancestors as well. We fell up under this category of inferior, all right, because we were conquered according to the institution of race. Audrey Smedley is a great person, an anthropologist who gives clarity, did a great article on explaining the institution of race and the agenda behind it. because it was to create a new social identity to all, to change our social identity. If I had it, I would put it up here, but I don't have the, that's in another presentation. So Lincoln goes on to say, our Republican system was meant for a homogeneous people. He declared, as long as the Negro continued to live with the whites, they would constitute a threat to the national security. Family life might also collapse, and the increase of mixed breed bastards might someday challenge the supremacy of the white man. So were the enslaved Negroes, were our ancestors waiting on the anticipation of Abraham Lincoln to freedom? When Abraham Lincoln did have no care in the world about salvation. It was all about union. That was all about saving the union. It had nothing to do with us. So here's a key thought about the Christopher Columbus era. Excuse me. Christopher Columbus discovered absolutely nothing. He had an encounter, but not a discovery. He was an adventurer, an opportunist, a willful murderer, a liar, a pedophile. And what he set in motion was the basis of Western capitalism, the exploitation of Africans and indigenous Americans who had committed no crimes against Europe and did not know of European intention to conquer and enslave them. Travelers from the great African empire of Mali in the 1300s reported that King of Mali told them of two expeditions with hundreds of boats sent from Africa west into the great oceanus Ethiopiacus, in other words, the Atlantic Ocean, which was called the Ethiopian Ocean. Some evidence suggests that there may have been periods of ancient trade from Brazil. There was physical evidence of a settlement dating back to the year the 10th century. A little piece of history. Dufuna, canoe is an 1,000-year-old canoe discovered by the Fulani herdsmen in Nigeria in 1987. It is the oldest boat to be discovered in Africa and one of the oldest known worldwide. He never set foot on North America nor South America. He set in motion a concept called divine right and manifest destiny, meaning in the name of God, because they had ships and basic technology that they had the right to go into other people's countries and exploit their resources, take their women and rape them at will and use their babies as alligator bait. See, maybe if he'd actually traveled to the Americas, he would have discovered, he would have had an encounter with a group of people in what is now called Loudoun County, Tennessee, which is, you're referring to the Bat Creek Stone, who wrote in an ancient language that is of ancient Hebrew vernacular. The Christopher Columbus era is what set in motion the following thoughts about Africans and indigenous Americans. The myth of a people waiting in darkness for people to bring them light. See, this is what evangelism is really today. This is what evangelism is. This is what those evangelists goes out. They're actually operating under a, how can I put it? A colonistic mindset, to colonize, to push forward an agenda. Give this myth of a people waiting in darkness for another people to bring them light. You know, like think about the natives for when we think about Puerto Rico. Think about what happened when these people took Christopher Columbus in. These people that was lost at sea, lice, disease, all kinds of stuff, took them in and helped them, restored them, not knowing that they are actually declaring these rights on their territories, and did what? Look at what happened. Look at the things that they were subjected to and others were subjected to, all in this manifest destiny. Going right back here, right? Divine rights and manifest destiny, right? Saying that they had the right and declare on someone else's territory that they are in darkness and that they came to bring them light by what? Completely raping, kidnapping, doing everything that's inhumane, everything's not natural, doing all those things to deceive the people, broke covenants with them. The myth of a people without a legitimate deity. The myth of the invader and conqueror as being civil by bringing order. So there is an ongoing theme that our ancestors, that our people is waiting for salvation to be brought to us by way of what is called the civilized world, right? Because we are viewed as uncivilized, those that are what? Kicking against the system. These civilized ones are the ones that's subjecting, that's saying, hey, we want to embrace your oppression. We want to embrace your system. Those are civilized ones. The uncivilized ones are saying, no, this is not our heritage. We do have a heritage. This is what my heritage is. And we have to fight among especially our own people. Our own people. Our own people. Let me go back here. Let me play this video again. And you guys should be insulted. You guys should feel the same way that, here it is. Let me show this again. Let me show this video again.
I'm so glad you're here because you can bring great clarity. Can you tell us a little bit about the Sephardic Jews and how they were scattered because they went west?
I sure can.
Because the reason why I want to is because a lot of them, and a lot of people don't know this, are in the Caribbean.
They are.
In the islands.
And you're one of them. I know that.
I'm one of them.
I know that.
Because, a lot of folk don't know that those roots are there. One of the first batches of slaves that came to Jamaica, they were the Sephardic Jews. It's documented.
And they're all over the Caribbean, South America, Central America, and even the South Central United States.
Wow.
And DNA testing is a factor in all this now.
Now, notice the interaction of the Ashkenazi Jew that's sitting right next to our brother who is recognized as being Sephardic. There's no argument going on there. There's no demeaning. There's none of that. That you don't see what we're with right now of those that say that they are Bible toters, supposedly defending the word of God. You don't see any arguments there. You don't see any of that. And he even pointed out, proved it through DNA. But here's we as a people, we still got to go through all of this. That kind of make me think about, what's her name, Oprah, the role that she played on, what's that movie, Color Purple. All my life, I had to fight. All my life, I had to fight. She just expressed all the things that she had to go through. And then in the end, she said she never thought that she would have to deal with her husband putting his hands on her. Here it is. We as a people, every time you turn around, we got to fight at every angle. And we always have those within our community to argue for what? Take the argument to these other communities. Take the argument to these other communities. But we got to constantly deal with this stuff from every angle. Falsifying sources and all kinds of stuff, just to try to prove a point, just so that way you can feel good about yourself, to try to steal a hope from a people that have been deemed hopeless, to try to snatch the grips of salvation from those that have been deemed to be unsalvageable, just for talking points. And we wonder why others are making songs about us, why we are called they're made bywords and all those things about our people. Something is wrong with this. Is why the Most High, that's why the scripture says it's the Most High, through his Son, is going to do what? Collect us, bring us all together. Because we have so many different agendas out here. So there's an ongoing thing that our people, we are waiting for salvation to be brought to us by the so-called civilized. We're the only people that our Messiah don't look like. Only people that would embrace our deliverer not to look like us. Well, when you go to other cultures, their messiahs, their deities is a reflection of their community. We're the only community where our people don't look like us. We're the only community. Look, I was in that system of Christianity for a long time. Long time. Thank the Most High for my deliverance and allowing me to lead our family out of that, lead our family out of that. And we're raising up our children to be deliverers. See, deliverer, there's a difference between being the deliverer versus being a redeemer. Our Messiah is the redeemer, right? But we can raise up deliverers. In the book of Judges, we see multiple deliverers for every captivity that Israel had to deal with. But we're the only community that we look for other communities to be our deliverer versus raising deliverers within our community. Every last one of us can raise our children to be the answer, to be the solution. But instead, we so divided, which creates the problem. Anyway, let me stop. You guys trying to make me preach up in here. Let's go to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 3 and 4. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come except they come falling away first, and that the man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. Falling away, son of perdition, who opposes and exalted himself above all that is called the Most High, or that is worshipped, so that he, as Most High, sitteth in the temple of the Most High, showing himself that he is the Most High. So when we start understanding those images, the images, Jesus looking like a Caucasian, guess what? They are inside assemblies. And that is the reflection of the very people that have oppressed us. Now, I'm not saying that it's okay to draw images that look just like us, because we're not supposed to make any graven images. So I want to make that clear, so no one take my words out of context. But I will say that we know that the Messiah looked like us. We know that they had hair just like us. We know when we look at the book of Numbers chapter 6, we see that they had locks, right? That was popular, especially those that took the Nazarite vow. We know that Samson had locks. We know that Solomon had locks. We know that Ezekiel had locks. We know that that's what popular among the ancient Israelites. And we could take it a step further. It wasn't just among the ancient Israelites. You will find wigs that Egyptians wore, especially when you get the 18th dynasty. You will see that they had locks. They were wearing wigs with locks on them. So locks were popular. They were not called dreads. But anyway, let me stop. We're the only people that the Savior that we're anticipating on does not look like the reflection of our community. That's why that prophecy of Revelation chapter 1 is making it clear. They don't describe the Messiah's physical appearance all through what is called the New Testament. When we get to Revelation, the reason why it's such a miracle, it's going to be a lot of shocked people when they see the Messiah come and he looks just like us. Just like us. And he's going to be very upset. That's why his eyes are flaming at the disposition of what he see his people have to endure. What became of our people? Man, we better stop with all this craziness. But there's a day of judgment that's coming. We see a paradigm shift right now. Anyway, let's deal with chattel slavery real quick and wrap this up. All right, because my throat is recovering from last week. Let's deal with chattel slavery versus indentured servitude. Let's deal with chattel slavery versus indentured servitude. Right? The Merriam-Webster Dictionary definition of indentured servitude. A person who signs and is bound by indentures to work for another for a specified time, especially in return for payment, travel expenses, and maintenance. Now, I want to make this clear. Even the consequences that I read, the curses, the blessings, and the consequences, they're perpetual. They're perpetual because Israel went into what? A perpetual captivity. We look at just Judges alone, the multiple captivities that they went through. But anyway, indentured servant, a person who signs and is bound by indentures to work for another for a specified time, especially in return for payment of travel expenses and maintenance. Indentured servant is someone who voluntarily enters into an agreement to offer themselves as laborers in exchange for travel expenses. See, that's what Israel was trying to do when we start studying Israel, especially trying to circumvent the judgment. That's what Deuteronomy 28:68 is referring to, that Israel will try to enter into agreements with other nations in an attempt to circumvent the judgment to come. That's what it means. So let's deal with a popular Facebook post. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to get into all of this. I'm just going to go right to the actual rebuttal to this, because this will take a lot of time. I want to save some time because my voice, I'm literally losing my voice. So let's skip here. I just want to go straight debunking the myth that Irish were slaves too, because this whole thing started, this narrative started when Obama was elected. The former President Obama, Barack Obama, when he was elected, that's when you start really seeing the names and all of that circulate. So let's just start here. Debunking a myth, the Irish were slaves too, but actually debunking a myth, the Irish were not slaves too. That's what this article is titled, right? This is from New York Times, right? 2017. Debunking a myth, the Irish were not slaves too. All right, let's debunk this. It has shown up on Irish trivia Facebook pages, which I was going to highlight that article, that Facebook page where it first started, but just too much to read. In Scientific American magazine, on white nationalist message boards, little known stories of the Irish slaves who built America are sometimes said to have outnumbered and been treated worse than slaves from Africa. But it's not true. Historians say the idea of Irish slaves is based on a misreading of history, and that the distortion is often politically motivated. Far-reaching memes have taken offline and are used as racist barbs against African Americans. The Irish were slaves too. The meme says, "We got over it, so why can't you?" A small group of Irish and American scholars has spent years pushing back the false history. In 2016, 82 Irish scholars and writers signed an open letter denouncing the Irish slave myth and asked publications to stop mentioning it. Some complied, removing or revising articles that reference the false claim. But the letter's impact was limited. The legal differences between the indentured servitude, notice this here, the legal differences between indentured servitude and chattel slavery were profound. According to Matthew Riley, an archaeologist who studies Barbados, unlike slaves, servants are not considered legally human. Their servitude was based on any form of coerced labor that can be described as slavery from ancient Rome to modern day human trafficking. But in colonial America and the Caribbean, right, the word slavery had a specific legal meaning. Europeans, by definition, were not included in it. Let me say that again. Europeans, by definition, were not included in it. And indentured implies two people had entered into a contract with each other, but slavery is not a contract. There's not a single contract that our ancestors entered into to be enslaved in this country. It's being written before written to try to change the narrative. Anyway, said Leslie Harris, a professor of African American history at Northwestern University, it's often about being a prisoner of war. Let me say that again. It is often about being a prisoner of war. Our ancestors were prisoners of war. Each and every one of you guys that are watching this, if you're descendants of slaves, guess what? Our ancestors were prisoners of war, POWs, and guess what? We are POWs. Man, anyway, that is a critical distinction. Does this photo show Irish slaves in the United States? Right. This is an article, and what this is doing, I'm not going to read all this because I'm losing my throat. But this is basically doing a fact check on an article, on a photo that has been circulating on the internet, one of the many photos. But this article by Snoops completely knocks it down. And it's the article titled, "Does this photo show Irish slaves in the United States?" And this is an image that they would share. These are not slaves. These are actually minors, right? But I'm not going to get into the specifics because, again, I'm losing my voice, right? This is another image, same thing, right? And I'm just showing you here, right? And this is what they would use when another photo that was circulated. Same thing. These were not indentured servants, right? This is not from time like when we start getting into like the 17th century, the 18th century. This is a 20th century photo here. I'm getting into the explanation just too much. I encourage you to go watch the lesson that I did on the Irish, what I did on St. Patrick's, and I really go into the details. So I just really don't, like I said, I just don't want to get into all of this because I'm sake of time and losing my voice. Okay. Right. But let me highlight this one article to show this is coming from African and African American Studies, descriptive article, Early Modern History, Economic History, Political History, World History, October 19, 2016. I just want to highlight one point. This was an easy task, but these Englishmen did have a number of Irish prisoners serving various sentences. They decided on a way for these Irish prisoners to work off their sentences on Barbados sugar plantations. They sent thousands of indentured Irish prisoners to Barbados. So this is making it clear they were not forced into they were not in chattel slavery. They were not forced into chattel slavery. They were indentured servants. They were prisoners who were serving various sentences. And they were used to work off their sentence. They were indentured servants, right? Working off their sentences. Indentured servitude is not like chattel slavery because it's only dealing with that individual. It's not perpetual. The children that are born out from someone that was an indentured servant don't have to worry about being subjected to that debt. That debt is not passed down to them. So, not getting into all of that. So what does our scripture says about indentured servitude? Exodus chapter 21, verse 2 and 3, it starts off. Now, these are the judgments which thou shalt set before them. If thou buy an Hebrew servant 6 years, he shall serve, in the seventh, he shall go out free for nothing. So there was a 6-year period. Especially when we're dealing with Hebrews that are working off their debt to other Hebrews. There was laws in place. Right? So slavery among Hebrews were not intended as a permanent condition. Let me say that again. Slavery among, and I want to say indentured servitude, because I don't like to use slavery, right? Indentured servitude among Hebrews was not intended as a permanent condition, but a voluntary, temporary refuge for people suffering what would otherwise be desperate poverty. See, at that time, they'll work off their debt. And what generally what happened if someone owed debt to another person, they'll go before the judges. It's like what you see in this system that we live in. If someone is owed a debt, you have to what? Go to the judge, right? If you don't pay off your debt, and the debtors, the collectors want to what? Get their money, you go before the judge, and the judge will issue what? A judgment, right? An agreement on how to get that money back for whoever bringing the other person in, right? So that's the same thing here. This system, indentured servitude, was a system that was put in place to make sure that, guess what, the debt got paid. There was an agreement that was here. It wasn't just the Israelites that had indentured servitude there. The Egyptians had it. The Sumerian indentured servitude was among all nations at that time. And Israel had provisions for that. All right, how to manage it. All right. Let me fast forward here. So cruelty on the part of the servant owner resulted in immediate freedom for the servant. See, we could prove right here, just with these verses I'm going to highlight, that those that were operating as indentures, they had to be treated a certain way. They couldn't just be beaten and all that other stuff. Look at the scriptures that supports what I'm saying. And if a man smite the eye of his servant or the eye of his maid that it perish, he shall let him go free for his eye's sake. And if he smite out his manservant's tooth or his maidservant's tooth, he shall let him go free for his tooth's sake. So it's saying if you abuse the slaves, guess what? They will be the indentured servants. They will be what? Let go. Male and female. You knock out an eye. You damage the eye. You knock out a tooth. Whatever the case may be, guess what? They were allowed to go free. Right? Let me fast forward. I'm not getting into all of this. Right? So let's go to a testimony. Araba Kugono. Let's go here. See what he says about this, right? Eating a piece of sugar cane, some were cruelly lashed or struck over the face to knock their teeth out. We see slaves get knocked out for eating what? A piece of sugar, right? It goes on to say, some told me that they had their teeth pulled out to deter others and to prevent them from eating any cane in the future. So we see there's penalties. We see that our ancestors had, technically these systems that was put together, this institution of slavery, when we deal with the transatlantic world war that was spearheaded by the Roman Catholic Church and Christianity together, before they split, guess what? They had rules and they knew these laws, but they came up with what they call an ecclesiastical, right? Ecclesiastical papal bull, whatever, to do what? Justify their cruelty, because hey, the Pope can change the laws. The Pope can create laws. The Pope was the replacement, the substitute, the vicar of the Messiah, according to their institution. The same Shabbat and holy days were all the same, were the same for all. Notice this here. 6 days thou shalt do thy work, and on the seventh day thou shalt rest. Thine ox, donkeys may rest, and the son of handmaid and stranger may be refreshed. So guess what? All honored the Shabbat. So is the word slavery in the Bible? In the KJV, one word, the word slave is listed once, right? And we see this in Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 14. Is Israel a servant, abad? Is he a homeborn slave? Right? Madah or Mai, right? Descending in ancient Hebrew. Why is he spoiled? See, Jeremiah asked this question, right? Because it's like, man, the Most High is telling him that Israel is getting ready to what? Go into chattel slavery because what? Disobeying the laws, statutes, and commandments. And like, is Israel, is that our whole makeup to be what? In captivity? We constantly being in captivity. We constantly being subjected to not indentured, but chattel, right? Chattel, not indentured servitude. Is Israel a bondman? Is he a homeborn slave? Why then why is he given over to plunder? All right, but let's go ahead and fast forward, family. My throat is really, really bothering me here. Let me drink some of this tea. I should have broken this up into two parts, but I'm getting ready to wrap this up here. Let's see here. The testimony of Silas Jackson, who was saved. Let's see what he says about watch night. On Christmas Day, Mr. Ashby will call all the slaves together to give them presents, money, after which they spent days as they liked. On New Year's Day, we all were scared. Let me say that again. Family, they weren't, you don't see anything mentioning Abraham Lincoln. This is a direct testimony of Silas Jackson giving an account. Mr. Ashby would call all the slaves together, give them presents, money, after which they spent all day as they liked. Now, according to his testimony, this particular slave owner was not cruel to them. Look at it. It says gave them gifts, gave them money, after which they spent the day as they liked. But notice what it says. Goes on to say, on New Year's Day, we all scared. That was the time for selling, buying, and trading. We did not know who was to go or come. Let me give you another. Right? Dr. Flint owned a fine residence in town, several farms, about 50 slaves, besides hiring a number by the year. Hiring day at the South State takes place on the 1st of January. On the 2nd, the slaves are expected to go to their new masters. On a farm, they worked until the corn and cotton are laid. They then have 2 holidays. Some masters give them a good dinner under the trees. They work until Christmas Eve. If no heavy charges are meantime brought against them, they are given 4 or 5 holidays, whichever the master or overseer may think proper. Then comes New Year's Eve. Then comes New Year's Eve. Then comes watch night, and they gather together their little alls, or more properly speaking, their little nothings, and wait anxiously for the dawning of day. At the appointed hour, the grounds are thronged with men, women, children, waiting like criminals to hear their doom pronounced. The slave is sure to know who is the most humane or cruel master within 40 miles of him. It is easy to find out on that day who is clothed and feed his slaves well. He is surrounded by a crowd begging, please, master, hire me this day. I will work hard, very hard, master. Right? Doesn't it sound familiar? Deuteronomy 28:68. Show me what community went through what we went through. Show me. Watch night, they were anticipation on what was going to become of them during New Year's. Because if the plantation was in the red, right, on New Year's, they made their arrangements, they sold them. And then January 2nd was like considered moving day. It is easy to find out on that day who clothes and feed his slaves well, for he is surrounded by a crowd begging, please, master. Deuteronomy 28:68, master. Please, master, hire me, master. Hey, circumvent this judgment, master. Master, I'll work hard for you, master. Please, master, hire me this year, master. I'll work very hard, master. I agree, master. I'm entering into an agreement. I promise you. But no man will be able to redeem them. Master, a burden, an utterance, chiefly a doom, burden. So our ancestors were screaming out, Massa. I know some try to mock me, making that clear, showing that Massa, our ancestors, were not pronouncing Passa. They were actually saying Massa, or mispronouncing master. They were actually saying Masa, Masa. That's a Hebrew word, a burden, an utterance, chief, a doom, burden. That's a Hebrew word. So our ancestors were screaming, was pleading. Come on, family. We sitting up here arguing over trivia stuff. Let me show you one more here. Incident in the Life of a Slave Girl, written by herself, by Harriet Ann Jacobs. Let's see what she says. Time is it? Oh man, it's late here. The slave mother. This is one of the sad stories, right? This is really sad. This one right here, man, will make you feel some kind of way. The slave mother, New Year's Day, come laden with peculiar sorrows. She sits on her cold cabin floor, watching the children who may all be torn from her next morning. And often does she wish that she and they might die from before the day's dawn. She may be an ignorant creature, degraded by the system that has brutalized her from childhood. But she has a mother's instinct and is capable of feeling a mother's agonies, capable of feeling a mother's agonies. On one of these sale days, I saw a mother lead her 7 children to the auction block. She knew that some of them would be taken from her. But guess what? But they all were taken from her. It said, but they took all. The children were sold to a slave trader, and their mother was bought by a man in her own town. Before night, her children were all far away. She begged the trader to tell her where he intended to take them. Tell her. But this he refused to do. Why? Because how could he, when he knew he would sell them one by one, wherever he could command the highest price? So this is saying that her children is sold to someone, but couldn't tell her where he was going to sell them to, right? Because many will go buy and then what? Resell. Doing all, man. But this is one of the saddest stories I came across. All her children was taken from her. All her children was taken from her. Now, this is where I want to give clarity to what I said. This is John Simpkins, Slavery in the United States. And I'm just going to read this last one and we'll wrap up. If a slave man and woman wish to marry, a party would be arranged some Saturday night among the slaves. The marriage ceremony consisted of the pair jumping over a stick. If no children were within a year or so, the wife was sold, right? But notice this, after New Year's, if there was any debt or mortgage on the plantation, the extra slaves were taken to Clayton and sold at the house. In this way, families were separated. So family, I know I gave you a lot of information, right? And also, if you want to really understand what the scripture says against chattel slavery, go to Exodus chapter 21, verse 16, right? The scriptures is very clear on what the Most High, the laws against chattel slavery. Matter of fact, let me see if I can include that real quick. As well, just so that way I can put it up here on the screen, because for the most part, I like to, if I'm quoting something, I like to put the source up, but I want to put this one up so that way you guys can actually see the text. You can see the visual of it. So let me just go ahead and put this in here real quick so that way you guys can see it. Bear with me 1 second. And then guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. I appreciate you guys for, being part of this teaching. I know we took a little while to get going because of the technical issues that I had earlier with the audio, and I'm sure trying to debate whether or not I'll go ahead and accept the Windows update to completely update this OS, because this is one of the reasons I'm having my performance issues. All right, let's see here. Let's put this in here. All right, and I'm going to put it on the screen so that way you guys can see it. And I want you to see the law so that way you can see it. This law is just not an individual law, because I teach that this is an individual law. No, this law is for all of Israel, right? And there is a debt, there is judgment that's going to take place, in which the Most High is going to bring to judgment that have kidnapped our people. There's a judgment, even though we've been cursed as a people, but the Most High do have mercy. Let me see. He still have limitations. Certain things, certain cruelties, he does not tolerate, and so he is going to bring judgment. But anyway, let me show this here. Right, this is Exodus chapter 21, verse 16. Right, the first 15 verses deal with indentured servitude, but this law right here forbids chattel slavery. Right, and it says, "And he that stealeth a man and selleth him, or if he be found in his hand, he shall surely be put to death." All right, so I want to put that on your screen. And again, family, I really appreciate you guys for being here on this presentation. I know it's a lengthy presentation, over 2 hours. Let's see here. Where can we get that book you're quoting from? It's a few books that I'm quoting from, but let me see if I can put some of them inside the comment section, right? I'm going to post it right now. These are some of the books here. Let me see here. All right. All right, let me post it here. All right. Slavery in the United States. This is a book. You can get these on Kindle as well. Here's one of them. Let's see, one of the sources. All right, let's see here. Here's another source. Right. I'm just going to post it inside the comment section for you guys. Let's see here. And these are some good books to use as a source. And I lost a lot of books. A townhouse that I own near the Buckrow Beach down here, right. I lost a lot of my books because of the roof got taken off when we had a real bad hurricane about 9-10 years ago. And I lost a lot of good books because of the water damage. All right, so here's another one here. All right, so I'm putting some of them inside the comment section right now. All right, here's another. Okay, so I put a few of them here, family, for you to use as a source. And I hope and pray that this answers your question, and go back over the lesson. And family, I really appreciate it. And I am getting ready to take it down. My throat is throbbing right now. All right. So again, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. And thank you guys for taking the time out of your schedule to watch the presentation. So with that being said, my contact information is in the bottom here, this ticker. If you want to contact me. For those that are not familiar with my alternate channel, it's called We Woke Extended. Created that so that way in the future I'll start doing our Shabbat services there. And just in case I have issues on this channel, I can use that as an alternative, because I've been having a lot of issues with some of the crazy things that YouTube has done. So with that being said, family, in the words of the Most High, as he encouraged Israel through Moses when they were when they came out of Egypt, the Most High said to them, said to Moses to give this message to the Israelites. He said, and I'm quoting Exodus chapter 14, verse 13 and 14. He said to them, these Egyptians that you see here today, you will never have to deal with them ever again. You will never have to deal with them ever again. He said that the Most High, he said, fear ye not, stand still, and see the salvation of Yahweh. These Egyptians that you see here today will not have power over you again. Those strongholds will not have power over you again. This suppression, all these different things will not have power over you ever again. The Most High will fight for you, but you have to hold your peace. Can't go back, can't stay here, keep moving forward. And the Hebrew word in that text is arash, which means be quiet. Shalom.